Hi, everyone. This is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm going to take a look at a birth chart and give you some simple tips for interpreting charts on your own. I'm actually doing this as a part of a three-part series. In each talk, I'm going to be looking at a chart. We're going to be looking at two natal charts and one horary chart. We're going to be illustrating different concepts in each chart. I'm doing this because I want to try to promote my upcoming class, which is called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. I also have a horary class that's beginning both in the middle of June. So check those out on my website, nightlightastrology.com. Go to the courses page. There's an early bird discount right now. You can save a lot if you sign up. There's a tuition plan, and then we have need-based tuition for people who are struggling with because of COVID-19. And we have always had need-based tuition. We've just opened it up for people who might really be hurting right now. And a lot of people are unemployed and so forth. So check those things out. And but the second purpose of doing this is just because a lot of people study and learn on their own. I like to try to mix up, mundane astrology, meaning what's going on in the sky and how does it affect all of us, monthly horoscopes, things like that, that are personal or collective, as well as things that are more educational for people who are students of astrology trying to learn how to practice and maybe have zero resources to be able to take a class whatsoever. So hopefully this sort of serves a bunch of different purposes at once. Anyway, so we're gonna excuse me, we're gonna take a look at one chart today and focus on a few specific techniques within this particular natal chart. So I've got this chart on the screen right now so that you can see it. And this is a chart reading that I did for someone a few years ago. They let me use their chart for a classroom that I teach. And so I'm just republishing this as this is actually part of a lecture that I teach in one of my classes. But um, anyway, so sometimes people sit down and they look at a chart and they go, I want to figure out what someone does for a living or what someone's professional calling might be. Like, I can't tell you how many people I sit down with quite regularly, and they'll say, what am I supposed to do? Like, what am I supposed to do with my life? What does my chart tell you about my career path or something like that? Okay, so to that end, there are always several methods, and sometimes people will get stuck by looking at the 10th house or the midheaven. The 10th house was traditionally called praxis by the Greek astrologers, sometimes referred to as karma by the Indian astrologers, which means action. So the 10th house and praxis also is related to the word practice, as in what do you do? What do you practice? So we need to get like really, really basic about this. When I was a little kid, there were like, I think Ronald McDonald videos that were circulating, McDonald's videos. And they were like, what are you going to be when you grow up? Anyway, I don't remember what the context of this, but it was just, as a kid, I remember everyone going, what are you going to be when you grow up? But this is actually a really modern thing in the sense that, we don't in the ancient world, you wouldn't necessarily have so much choice or facility, and you could dream and be whatever you want to be. So the 10th house has this interesting connotation of being what we're bound to do in the world, in the public world, outside the sphere of our private lives or our home. Out in the world, what am I bound to do? What am I fated to do? And by that, we could mean a wide variety of different things. Some people are bound when it comes to their social role in the world to be, misfits or black sheep or criminals, or, some people are, bound to do things that they really don't like. And other people are bound to do things that, they may love. And so one of the hardest things about reading a chart is that people typically come in with this assumption that the chart has some great promise for me in terms of, a very special and exciting and really fulfilling, career path or professional path or something like that. And if we look around at the world, even though it's not bad to dream, and I would never discourage anyone from, following their passion or their interests or pursuing those things, we can also tell that many people don't necessarily die happy with what they did for a living. They work at jobs they don't necessarily love. In fact, that's the reality for probably the majority of the world, compared to even, those of us who are privileged enough to live in a quote unquote first world country and, have that, at least the illusion of that kind of facility before us. So I'm saying all of this just to give us, to take a little pressure off from the 10th house and the midheaven, because traditionally the 10th house just said what we did out in the world, what we practiced, what occupied our time. And for some people, that's going to be, mothering, or that's going to be some kind of menial work, or you know what I mean? So I'm not saying that there's one thing that's better than another. I'm not placing any judgments on anything that a person could do. It's just to remind us that not every soul is promised some um, really fulfilling, destiny when it comes to career. So anyway, with that being said, there are multiple places in the chart that you can look for career. One rule of thumb is that angular planets of any kind in the first, fourth, seventh, 10th houses. Now, I'm using whole sign houses as ancient astrologers did and as Indian astrologers do. And by whole sign houses, if you have planets in the first, fourth, seventh, or 10th and they're prominent, the ruler of the ascendant's position, the ruler of the midheavens position, the position of the sun and the moon, really tight, close aspects between planets. Any of those things can give us a picture of what we tend to do, what we tend to be occupied with. And that is very similar to the 10th house meaning of practice or praxis, action in the world. So that's why you have to be really careful, because in ancient astrology, there's always multiple different ways of saying things, of seeing things. It's not like one house has the market cornered on your career. In other words, different planetary combinations that are really strong will inevitably speak to who you are and what you do that's very prominent, and therefore will often play a role in your career, as we'll see in this chart. But you can always start repeated, like a technique that you can use is to start with the 10th house and to go, okay, what's in the 10th house? Where is the ruler of the 10th house? Planets in a house will participate in the topics of that house, and the ruler of that house will participate in delineating the topics of that house. Both will do so. If you have an empty house, people always ask, does it mean anything? The answer is no, it doesn't. It just means that you need to look at the ruling planet of that house in order to get the information about that topic. So let's look at the 10th house, which is one of the places you can start. You could also look at the second house, which has to do with money and business and income and finances. There's lots of places anyway that you can look. So let's start with the 10th. In this person's chart, you'll notice that in the 10th house, they have a planet. There's Jupiter, and it's not far from the degree of the midheaven. So a very prominent Jupiter in the 10th house. And then let's look at the ruler. Oh, look, and it's in Taurus, which is Venus's sign. So the ruler of the 10th house in the midheaven is Venus. And oh, look, there's Venus retrograde in Gemini. I thought this was an appropriate one for our discussion today, since Venus is retrograde as I make this video. And it's conjoined with Mercury, who is also in Gemini and is the ruler of Gemini. And we could just throw in there that both are co-present with Mars in the same sign. Ancient astrologers believed that any planets in the same house had an effect on each other, even if they weren't in close degree-based aspect. That's called co-presence. So this is the basic information that I started with when this person asked me if I could see anything about their career. Now, I know nothing about this person, like a lot of clients. Some clients tell me a lot about themselves at the beginning. Other clients don't. I always like it when people come with specific questions, but I do like, getting to do a little bit of, a little bit of fun predictive guesswork at the beginning is nice. Anyway, so this person said, what do you see about my career? And I started off with Jupiter in the 10th. Now, I could have gone to Venus in the 11th as the ruler, but why not just start with the planet that's right there at the midheaven? Now, with Jupiter in the 10th house, some very basic things that in a fixed sign at the midheaven that I thought of were importance, prominence, rank, fame, success, prestige. And then in a fixed sign, you often think about people who are in management or people who are in control or in charge of maintaining or sustaining something. Fixed signs can be like that. So those were the first things that I put together. Now that gives me a description maybe of prominence or the degree of one's work or success or title, but it doesn't necessarily tell me what they do. So I started thinking, well, maybe they do something earthy. Maybe they do something Venusian. But in order to qualify that a little bit more, I really need to see where Venus is at. So then I looked over to Venus and I go, okay, here's Venus in the 11th house. That was traditionally a place of allies, friends, groups, networks of people, benefactors, and also wishes and dreams, and a sort of ambitious, forward thinking quality that was always associated with the 11th house, which is called the joy of Jupiter in the house of good spirit. So then I started saying, okay, well, let's then combine these Jupiterian qualities with Venus and Mercury, and maybe a little bit of Mars, but let's just start with Venus and Mercury. What do Venus and Mercury give us? Well, they give us things that may have something to do with art, aesthetics, beauty, diplomacy. Um, Especially Venus in Gemini with Mercury could then you could take those qualities and start blending them with things that are technical, analytical, rational, mental, educational, communicative, maybe something related to media, right, like that. And then we add in maybe that there is some way in which the career also has to do with groups of people or organizations or social networks or something like that. So that's where I started. Just really basic. I just said, okay, we've got Jupiter, prominence, success, maybe some degree of management, working for people who are like Jupiter in Taurus, or working for an organization that is like Jupiter in Taurus, or having some status within a company or job that is like Jupiter in Taurus. And then we add in the qualification of Venus, Mercury in Gemini in the 11th house, networks of people, and aesthetics meets, let's say, information. So I started off with some of those things. And usually what I'll do in a session is say, this is the outline of what I'm seeing archetypally, that seems to match what you do for a living, or what the kinds of skills that you'll want to combine somehow. Um, how does that sit with you? And so in this case, the person came back and said, well, that's really accurate because um, this person had worked for over 30 years in positions within upper level management in several different companies, and each company was a tech mogul, basically a technology tech companies, tech firms, that kind of thing. So this person also had worked primarily in marketing and public relations at the highest level in upper management. So marketing and public relations are going to be a Mercury Venus dynamic. And then in the 11th house, they had been in charge of the greater, the greater competition, a little bit of Mars in there, amongst other tech companies, and doing marketing, PR work, negotiating deals, and so forth. So that was a really nice expression of Jupiter at the midheaven, and then the qualifying information from Venus and Mercury. Most of the time, what people get wrong is they'll stop with one of the two. They'll either look at the ruler, or they'll look at a planet in the 10th, and they'll go, it must be that you do something that's really Jupiter and Taurus like. And then they might go down the path of saying you own a big farm, right? Or something Jupiter and Taurus. And the problem with that is that we haven't picked up the necessary information from the ruler and combined it, or tried to blend it together with the planet in the house. So one of the things that you always want to do, this is, just practice note for everybody, is when you're looking into any topic, look at the planet in the house and look at the ruler of the house. And the relationship between those two is going to be really important, because you'll get qualifying information. In this case, for example, it's not just Venus in Gemini. It is also Venus in Gemini, Mercury's sign, conjoined with Mercury. So there's a very strong Mercury-Venus blend here that ends up qualifying the career. Venus isn't on her own, in other words. So at any rate, there's lots more in this chart. There's lots more you could say about the retrograde. The other cool thing about this is that some people will then go, so does that mean that those are the only things that those planets represent in this birth chart? And the answer to that is no. The same planets, for example, could end up representing other things. For example, you'll see that the ruler of the 7th house is Saturn. Aquarius is in the 7th, a lot of fortune is in the 7th, and Saturn is in the 8th. And it's in Pisces, which is Jupiter's sign, back to Jupiter at the midheaven. So this person also ended up marrying several marriages with very wealthy people who were also in the tech industry at the highest levels of management. And I believe that one of the spouses was not in the tech industry, but was in upper level management in a different kind of industry. And I don't remember what it was. But nonetheless, you have the signature of, and there were some divorces that also led to issues around distribution of, or what do you call it? Alimony. Is it alimony? I can't remember. What is it? I forget what the technical name is when people divorce and then there are not custody over children, but battles about um, how the money is split up. So anyway, there were some of those issues. But the main thing is, notice that the seventh house ruler is Saturn, and then you're doing a Saturn Jupiter blend in the eighth house to the 10th house here to talk about the spouse. And it ends up being a story that's different, though there is some overlapping symbolism. You can do this in a lot of other ways too. For example, sometimes when you'll see, for example, that this particular individual has the fifth house ruler of children right at the midheaven. Now, this is not actually true about this individual, but let me just give you a sample delineation from this chart. Like, this is a potential prediction you could make, that with the moon in the fifth house and Jupiter in the 10th at the midheaven, that this person will have children who will somehow follow in their shoes professionally. Because you've got the moon in the fifth, is pretty good sign of having kids, and then you've got the dispositor, the ruler Jupiter at the midheaven. So maybe there'll be some sync up there. But you could see the same thing and go, if this person doesn't have kids, it's likely because they're going to be really focused on their work, in which case the moon in the fifth house might mean something completely different. Like, I just did a chart reading not long ago for a woman who had the moon in the fifth house, no children. She was older and she just loved riding horses. So moon in Sagittarius, the centaur, in the fifth house of pleasure and recreation and creativity. And she just was a avid horseback rider. Anyway, so those are just some fun tips that I thought you might enjoy today. I hope that you like this series, that you find it instructive. For those of you who can't afford to take my course or any courses online, I'm trying to provide this content to just give you some tips. If you are interested in taking my course, you can also check it out, which is at nightlightastrology.com. And you can, again, there's need-based tuition there for people who are struggling with COVID-19. In 10 years of doing this, to try to never turn away anyone. This particular class is bigger than most that I'm ever taught before because of COVID-19. I think probably about 60% of our students are on some form of need-based tuition because of the coronavirus right now. So, but it's a good thing. It's a good time to learn if you feel like it. So check it out. If you have any questions, info@nightlightastrology.com. And yeah, stay tuned for the next 2 episodes. I'm going to do another natal chart and then a horary chart. All right, take it easy.